Hi, everybody. How's it going? It's a beautiful day and we have some beautiful poetry, so we're going to get right down to it. I want to introduce our first artist. Our first artist is Cory Brown, who grew up in a small town on the plains of western Oklahoma near the banks of the Cimarron River, near where his father's parents and grandparents homesteaded early in the last century. He earned his BA in English and Philosophy from Oklahoma State University, then an MFA from Cornell, where he studied with such poets as Archie Amons and Robert Morgan. He taught at several institutions, including Cornell, several Hudson Valley Community Colleges, and RPI, before coming back to Ithaca to take a position in the writing program at Ithaca College in the early 90s, where he's currently the associate professor in the School of Humanities and Sciences, as well as the honors program. His most recent collection of poems, which came out this year, entitled What May Be Lost, is from Cayuga Lake Books, and his two previous collections, A Million Bells from 2005 and Poems, 1986 to 1998, are from Water Street Press. Please welcome Cory Brown.
I don't know how beautiful this is. I'm going for humor here. Intelligence. You might think I think highly of myself with such a title, that I'm about to address what I have prior knowledge of or own. A person knows how to play a sport well, and we say he or she's got game. Well, I'm here to say that for intelligence, I've begun to suspect I ain't got jack. Destitute as a hole in the ground, dumb as a muffin, dumb as a fence post, as the phrase goes. Though when I think about it longer than a wink, I picture that post doing a pretty smart job holding up not just a fence, but the very idea of one. The something there is that doesn't love a wall may be more than groundswell, as Mr. Frost tells us. But where would all that boundary theory be without the wall itself? I'm nowhere near smart as a post. What caused this crisis, you might ask? Who knows? One day you think you know a thing or two, own this or that, can rattle off rules about, say, modifiers and comma splices. The next day it's modifiers that own you. Quick, slow, handsome, plain as asphalt, accomplished, loser. Say what you will, that's me. No more determinant of my own status than a piece of clay in a child's hand. And comma splices? My own behind splice and still all of a piece. Why can't a comma cleave a couple of cheeky clauses? Ha, 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 ha. I'm afraid I've lost the sense of what intelligence is. Some think it quickness of thought. I'm slow as molasses in Alaska. Get tongue-tied just saying hello on the telephone. Can't think on my feet quick enough to say goodbye before whoever on the other end hangs up. Some think it's deep thought. I'm shallow as a sidewalk puddle. Wouldn't know deep standing in the Grand Canyon. My dog stares at me when she has to pee. You communicate with another species. You can call yourself Abraham, Albert, Lincoln, Einstein. But I'll forget. She'll stare, and I'll think all she wants is leftover milk in my cereal bowl. And the other day, after a good hour of it, she crawled up on my lap and peed on me. Dumb as a bedpan, I am. Maybe it's something else altogether, like wisdom, which, like happiness, can't be got till you're dead, as old Solon warned us. That is, fortune, quick as a wink, can turn wisdom into dumb as a doornail. I say call no one wise till they're dressed to the nines in beetles and worms. Well, this has Cinemapolis in it and that little Mexican food shop over there on the corner called The Death of Keats. I watched that new movie about him last night, cried my eyes out, and went straight to a Mexican bar with friends and ordered a taco and a double scotch. Then I went home, poured myself a White Russian, and watched a football game. Went to bed and dreamed I suffered an emotional breakdown. Checked myself in, and that was it. Said goodbye to friends and resigned myself to months of pill popping and group therapy. When I woke, it was autumn, the season of mists and mellow fruitfulness. And aside from the slight hangover, I felt great. I thought to myself, I have to remember to drink more water before I go to bed on nights like that. I looked outside and it was misty, which simply meant I wouldn't be taking any leisurely jogs to the park with my dog because she hates this kind of weather. I decided today would be the day I'd take a cigar out on the back porch and watch for nightingales in the dark. Just one more. Nice day. It's appropriate, right? 76 degrees in August. All the limbs on the massive maples in the backyard are smiling, albeit crookedly. This is in Trumansburg. Sorry about that. The smiles are what we call rye smiles, and these limbs are nothing if not rye. They reach up and out like a long-snouted dog sticking its nose in the air to catch a scent. I think they smell maybe a dead rat or the compost barrel in the yard or the deer shit pile near it. The sky, mid-afternoon, partly cloudy, looks on from above and smells everything and nothing, preoccupied with its own impatience, for fall, that is. You can see it in its face, the anticipated excitement of all those blustery days ahead. We've lost our only key to the car, but several cases of homemade strawberry jam are in the basement. I'm so happy today I could cut my head off and stick it in the garden to grow. Thank you, thank you.
Our next artist is Kathleen Kramer. And Kathleen Kramer has enjoyed writing all her life and wrote extensively as required by her work as a marketing coordinator and a research librarian. But it wasn't until she moved to Ithaca 20 years ago that she began to write, as she says, from the inside out. Ithaca's rich creative community and the friends she's found here have helped Kathleen launch herself into poetry and playwriting. She especially enjoys participating in readings like this one, and her poems have appeared in literary journals such as the Comstock Review, the Healing Muse, Passenger, and Advocate, among others. A chapbook, Inside the Stone, was published in 2003, and a full-length collection entitled Boiled Potato Blues in 2011, and another book called Planting Wild Grapes is in the works. So please welcome Kathleen Kramer.
Because this festival and this reading celebrates Ithaca and the spirit we sometimes find on its streets, this is my first poem. And you'll know the location, I'm sure. At the corner of Albany and Court. Picture this. I'm sitting in my car, waiting for the light, when I see, coming toward me, a bright yellow balloon. Untethered and utterly alone. Melon-sized, it bounces and bobbles down the street, casual and confident, unconcerned with the rules of the road. Nevertheless, it keeps to its lane. Buoyant, it somersaults along, kissing the pavement with puckered mouth, tumbling onto its rounded bottom like a plump circus clown. It crosses against the light and reaches my car. I smile down on it as it passes, think I hear humming, something in the key of B. I laugh, knowing everything will be okay. Everything. Maybe some of you are like the woman in this poem and get pleasure from knowing the names of things in nature. But I wonder if this trait can be wearing. Backyard biologist. She sings out the identities of wildflowers. Bird's foot trefoil, butter and eggs, spotted knapweed, Deptford pinks, as if introducing you to particular friends of hers. Divers and dabblers, she declares, of the ducks floating and bobbing in the shallows. Common merganser, she crows, flipping through Peterson's guide to confirm. Lying on her back among leaves fallen from the poplars, the sugar maples, the sweet gum, she sighs with satisfaction. Stratus, cirrus, cumulonimbus, enjoying the sibilance of that bird song floating flute-like from the deciduous forest at dusk. Hermit thrush, or is it veery? She's never sure, and this vexes her. You want to ask, can't you be happy with bird, leaf, cloud, flower? You want to take her back to board books and a bright yellow disc labeled sun. A brown stick holding up a green ball, quite content to be just tree. As we move through the years, there comes a point when we suddenly notice that our place in the flow of time has changed. This poem is called Currency. Time has his hand in my pocket, but I never feel his bony fingers. I know I've been robbed only when I try to spend the coins I thought were still there. I know only when my aching knee keeps me from climbing to the top of the hill, when no one in my office has heard Jack Benny's jokes, or the clink of glass milk bottles on the porch at dawn. When the handsome young man passes me on the street and his eyes show not the faintest flicker. I am becoming invisible. I am almost bankrupt. Youth is the coin of the realm, and my pocket is nearly empty. Some would say time is trading wisdom for youth, but wisdom is a foreign currency from a failing nation. When I take it from my pocket, press the wrinkles flat, only my friends will accept it. On the open market, it buys nothing. My dad, who's 93, lives on his own in a small town in western Pennsylvania, which is where I grew up. So I go there often to be with him and to help out a little bit with this and that. And this poem came to me during a recent visit there. It's called Rhododendrons. A hometown is where rhododendrons rest their arms on porch railings, cover front room windows with leafy fingers, leathery and green. It's where you can still pay your water bill at a counter in the back of the drugstore, and where the radio station broadcasts obituaries at noon on Fridays. It's where, after 60 years away, you may hear the announcer say in his sonorous voice, Robert Spicer, 72, of Osceola Mills. And remember the dusty horse barn. Remember the boy who showed you his penis, said he'd measured it with his school ruler, but you forget what the measurement was. I gotta do this, it's Ithaca, I gotta do this. In the 20 years that we've called this area home, we've seen how many folks here have a strong connection to the land. They want to grow as much of their own food as they can, and so forth. It's not a new phenomenon, of course. We did that in Maine, been there, done that, where the weather was a challenge, but the land was cheap. Subsistence Farming 101. When did wood stoves become romantic? I'm guessing 1968, when the Back to the Land movement flourished like zucchini plants, prolific, ubiquitous, self-important. Our stove, black and unadorned, smacked of practicality, squatting there on the blue linoleum. Its pipe snaked across the living room near the ceiling, then burst out through the wall gasping, for it didn't always draw well. On windy days, downdrafts belched smoke into the house, and we ate supper with streaming eyes that had nothing to do with onions I'd fried to flavor the venison. It mingled with the smell of 2 red-bone hounds, wet and steaming, perfumed our hair, our clothes, marking us as novices from the city. At Galusha's general store, they looked up, startled, when we walked in to buy galoshes and bug spray, essentials for life on our 25 acres, 1/3 swampland, all of it clouded with black flies. I got one more. It's a poem about downsizing. It's called Making Room. Surely you can do without the coppery sheen of your mother's hair. Smell of potatoes frying over that twig fire you and Nancy built when you were 8. You don't need the rustle of a garter snake shimmying through grass, nor rattle and grind of ice and salt in the ice cream churn. What use, trip, trap of 3 billy goats gruff, scrap of blue blanket rubbed bare, croupy cough at 2 a.m.? You won't miss the gleam of glass jars parading across the counter, golden peach halves, bright green beans, crimson tomatoes. That whiff of coal smoke on a gray winter day wasn't all that pleasant, nor the whinny of a small violin while the kitchen clock ticked off practice time. Certainly you can let go the frost which lingered in the shade of your sister's gravestone, first sight of your lover's face in the bus station crowd. There. Look at that heap of useless things, small memories found tucked between birth and death, graduations, and weddings. You'll have room now for political theory, geography of the Middle East, history of civilization.
Our next performer is Steve Paisely. Now, Steve is a finalist in the inaugural Ithaca Festival Poetry Contest, but that pales in comparison to his true accomplishments and the truly Ithacan sport of rutabaga curling. He is, in fact, a two-time medalist. Yes, that's right. Now, as I'm sure we all remember from watching on ESPN, Steve came in second place, the silver medal, in 2009. He bounced back from this bitter defeat, and in 2011 took the gold medal, which was just wonderful, phenomenal. If you've ever seen Steve's truck around town or the house he built himself on South Hill, well, let's just say you'd remember them. He will be entering the MFA program in poetry in Syracuse University in the fall, but like all folks with good sense, I'm sure he'll be back. Please welcome Steve Paisely.
Cornell wouldn't have me. But I'm going to commute, at least for the time being. Okay. I have 3 poems, all have an Ithaca connection. The first of these is poem for the 38th Annual Ithaca Festival. Correction, this is called Poem for the 37th Annual Ithaca Festival. In 1711, see there it is, Ebenezer Ithaca and a party of 7 set out from West Danby on a journey to the north. There was nobody there but the natives, of course. And he found a lake and a whole bunch of creeks. And he envisioned a town full of restaurants and boutiques. And he named it for himself, because that was clearly God's will. And likewise, Ithaca College up there on the hill. At least that's the way I've been told the story goes. Maybe somebody up at Cornell really knows. I don't know. But I know that in Ithaca, I'll never be alone. And I'm coming on home, and I'm coming on home. 1334 96B, running all together through the center of the city. 79, 89, 13A, spokes on a wheel, wheels on the highway. I drove here all night from Ithaca, Michigan, but you know, that other Ithaca was named after this one. It was late December. It was late December, and every Ithacan was watching the sky play that long, slow, gray riff again, when up from the lake came a terrible sound, like the songs of the lost and the dead and the drowned. From the Twilight Zone, it was the voice of Rod Serling, providing narration for rutabaga curling. And then, what to my wondering eyes should appear but a man in a sleigh pulled by billions and billions and billions of tiny reindeer. He tossed his tuber with a startling precocity, with just the right spin and the perfect velocity. And watching in wonder this sprightly rutabagan, I knew in a moment it must be Then he sprang to his sleigh where his team was a-prancing and flew off in the general direction of Lansing. And he cried as he coursed through the night sky above, "Happy solstice to all! We're all made of star stuff!" Now, you have to feel bad for the good Dr. Sagan, this rational guy in the land of the pagans. But you know, he liked to do the nasty after smoking some pot. Maybe that's why the Commons has so many head shops. So don't push me, 'cause I'm close to the edge of a bridge, over a gorge, where I might lay my head. But it's okay. If I jumped in some manic attack, there's a net there to catch me and bounce me right back. I'd brush myself off, thank Cornell for my luck and go get a pizza from the hot pizza truck. Or maybe cruise on downtown, because you know nothing is finer than the blue plate special at the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Street Diner. And if the Finger Lakes are flinging flakes of snow from off their fingertips that blow through your soul on a lake effect breeze, remember, the lake's so deep that the lake don't freeze. And maybe Ithaca Falls turns to Ithaca Icicle, but hey, there goes Faye on her radical bicycle. And look, it's the mayor with his sweet baby face. He's made a park out of his parking space. And summer comes and the students go and you can't imagine it could ever snow. And who cares if the inlet's got hydrilla? You can swim in the gorge of the Cascadilla. That's Cascadilla, not Cascadilla. Where you been eating at? Viva Taqueria? Now, if your friends won't let you shop at Walmart or Target, why, there's the Ithaca Commons and the farmer's market. And no, that's not the Dalai Lama in his motorcade. It's the Volvo Ballet and the Ithaca Parade. All those Volvos, they seem to run forever, till there's nothing but stickers holding their bumpers together. But even they are outnumbered by the bumpers of Priuses, proclaiming the coexistence of Buddha and Jesus. We have never been bound by the rules of normality. We are right nirvana in the cosmic totality. We are 10 square miles surrounded by reality. And we need no leaders to enlightenedly lead us, or that's how the Utney readers see us. We dance in the streets, play music from our porches, and swim under waterfalls because Ithaca is gorgeous. So go north of the South Hill and east of the West Hill. Go right downtown to the Ithaca Festival. Wonderful, waterful, magical, mythical. We're making a festival of all things Ithacal. For rhymes irresistible and rhythms infectual, artists political and artists conceptual, and baubles and bangles and tasty comestibles, you got to get down to the Ithaca Festival, where the music is sweet and the beat is insistent, like the last time you danced and the first time you kissed, and the roots and the rhythm will always remain, and you'll do it all over again and again. And you know that in Ithaca you'll never be alone because you're coming on home. You're coming on home. I don't know that that's a Cornell type of poem. I think that's called doggerel. It wasn't so much of a valley that they lived in, but a place where, strangely, there wasn't a hill. On 3 sides the land rose up, the East Hill, the West Hill, the South Hill, named as if they were the only ones in the world. Where the North Hill should have been, somehow things had become inverted, for there lay a lake, so deep that no one knew its bottom, and so long that the far end, if it had an end, could not be seen. In winter, the north wind blowing down its length would pick up pieces of the lake into itself and carry them up into the hills, where the water would be wrenched again from the air, and you couldn't tell with any certainty where the lake was and where it was not. The face of the lake was always the face of the sky, and yet even on the brightest days of summer, there were bits of winter in it, flecks of silver and gray, chopped in among the blue. And though they could not have told you why, when the people sent their houses clambering up the hillsides, they always shied away from the lake. They were not a watery people, and it was too vast a thing and too restless to have so close to home. They gave it no name of their own.
Our next artist, Wendy Babiak. Wendy is a finalist in this festival poetry contest. Her book of poems, Conspiracy of Leaves, came out in 2010 with Plainview Press. Her poems have been published in a wide variety of journals, both in print and online, including Barrel House, the Tampa Review, Big Bridge, No Tell Motel, and Poems Against War. She currently serves as co-editor of Poets for Living Waters. Please welcome Wendy.
I'm going to do the first one. It was one that I did for the contest, which I was thinking T-shirt, so I made it little and rhythm and rhyme. I made it fun. It's festival time. The snow's long gone. Mud season's done. Time to hit the street with marching feet and declare victory over winter's tyranny. Let's celebrate the sun, have all kinds of fun, with local food to eat, bands that pack a beat, handcrafted beauty, and the spirit of unity. So come down to the commons, come out to the park. We'll usher in summer. We'll dance after dark. My next poem is an Ars Poetica. You know, poets like to make a sort of a statement of the purpose of their art. And that's what we call them. And I called my nonsense poem number 1. I've got a magic dragon I carry in my pocket. I pull her out when I need some conversation. She tells great jokes. She likes to make me laugh. She tells me how she'd wear her hair if she were human. I'd wait until it rained to wash it, she says. I tell her how if I were a dragon, I would fly up to the balloons to advise them. Don't land there, not among the roses or the blackberries or the thistle with its purple tuft. She laughs at me when I say I would eat bullets and breathe fire. They're awfully bitter, she says, and you have such a sweet tooth. I tell her if I were a dragon, I would dress in drag, like a reptilian James Dean, and pretend the tail wasn't mine when it sent cereal boxes crashing down in the aisles of the grocery store, broken jars of spaghetti sauce at my scaly feet. She says she'd like to see that. She says if she were a mother, she'd make her children pick up all their toys. I say I'd like to see that, too. If I were a dragon, I'd catch shooting stars on my tongue and kiss the ocean so I could hiss my husband's name in steam. I'd slither my way into the chicken coop and con the hens into telling the truth about the egg and who came first. I'd grow as huge as a mountain and fly all the way to the dark side of the moon, where I would scoop up the cold rocks and carry them back in my beak and drop them carefully on the world as poems in the rain. And if someone who couldn't stand the chill cast a spell to make me shrink to the size of a pebble, I'd wash my feet at the edge of a puddle and put on my lipstick in a convex mirror of dew. Now this next one, please don't take the title the wrong way. I'm not poking fun at people who are suicidal. I've suffered depression myself for a very long time. It's well under control. Humor helps. But I'm poking fun a little bit at, this is a great poetry reading. I've never heard so much laughter at a poetry reading. Sometimes poetry readings aren't like that. So this poem's called Time Contemplating Suicide. No, I don't mean I've been spending time imagining myself hanging from the rafters or my blood seeping into bathwater like red paint. No, I mean imagine time as a woman who's just had enough of our suffering. Her watching the millennia trickle by and us never getting any better at seeing that she'll nearly stop for us to witness the flutter of a hummingbird, the breeze through an old rose's petals, or how cottonwood seeds can float almost suspended midair in the stillness of a summer afternoon. And instead just bitching about how she flies when we're spending her fruitlessly, and the way near the end of our lives we realize how much of her we've wasted. And so the august lady contemplates her end, imagines the apocalypse, when she'll fold in on herself, bringing the Alpha to the Omega, letting the great snake finally swallow his own tail. And what will we know? Her secrets will die with her, her grave lonelier than anything on or under earth, no one to sing dirges or send prayers skyward, no sky left even, just ashes everywhere, and no living flesh to wear them. I get to that end and my daughter goes, oh! This next one, we lived for 3 years in New Orleans, well before Katrina. We were in Shreveport when Katrina came through. But we had gone back for a visit. A friend was getting married. And this, I got all these feels, right? So this poem happened. It's called Bitter in New Orleans. It's happy hour down at St. Joe's bar. He's there with his boys, drinking pitchers of watered-down wine. Mary's at home, playing mahjong with the women, whining about housework and weeds, dollars and dime store clerks, the jerks in line at Canal Villeray. Ever since Jesus took off, nothing's been right. The mosquitoes here bite harder than back home. The antique shops offered a pittance for his sandals, his old carpenter's tools. What fools they were to leave, to heave history in that sack and take off for some dream of freedom and art. Joseph isn't even working with wood anymore, and the cops here are just as mean. But at sunset, church spires rise above the shops on Magazine Street like hollyhocks growing among herbs. Then nothing disturbs the peace she feels walking at Audubon Park, watching the full moon flirt in the patches of sky between the live oak's branches. But tonight, it dangles a mere crescent, spare blue light dusting borders of solid shadows. She hurried home in fright. Now, this is an Ithaca poem. It was published in Ithaca Lit, which is our local national journal that should probably get more attention. In the spirituality issue published last winter. It's called Hurrying Uphill. Out of the scrub to my right, a hawk broke, mere feet in front of my windshield, tearing across Remington to hunt down slope, the down of its breast, ruffled by its speed, unaware of the danger that I, in my car, posed. How does a hawk mean anything? I couldn't know, but still, unthinking, something opened as if a key had been turned, and lifting my right foot, I slowed, sure that somehow, someone had spoken. And this next one was also published with that. It's called Hierophany. Now, hierophany is one of those great, the Greeks have words that just mean a lot in a few syllables, and I love using them because English is kind of lacking. Greek is a little bit like German in that way. They just pack all this meaning. And hierophany means when the divine breaks into daily life. And this is for Deanna Graff, who was my best friend in high school, and her first child had 2 open heart surgeries before she was 1 year old and turned out to be autistic. She had been born with tetralogy of Fallot, and it just, motherhood did not present this, hallmark experience as she had hoped. But I admire her immensely for how she's dealt. And this is for her. It happens to you. I know. You've said, waiting in your car or walking the dogs, watching to see what you will see, that sudden wing flash, the crimson leaf settled on a blanket of green, or the poem the clouds write across an azure sky, the trees' hands waving. And the God that is the world suddenly appears as a web that you are a part of, and the joyfulness erases everything else. And of course you have to laugh. Even the grass is in on it. And this last one, it's called A Woman with a Broom. Every day, my work is undone. The dogs come in shaking off tree bits. The cats track litter, shed their rich fur. The man drops food, and the kids don't wipe their feet. It is what it is. And isn't entropy always with us? Dust leaps from every living thing. To live is to disintegrate a little at a time. Spiders spin their webs because they must, because they're unmade as quick as peace. And isn't God like a woman with a broom? Invisible, behind the scenes, opposing always the forces of disorder, just wanting a place she can feel free to plant her bare feet.
Alex Chertok is the inaugural Ithaca Festival poet. Yeah. He has worked, published or forthcoming in the Cincinnati Review, Barrow Street, Bat City Review, Line Break, 32 Poems, The Journal, Cimarron Review, and Hayden's Ferry Review, among others. Now, in everybody's bio so far, I've been making up a couple of periodicals. I'm just wondering, seeing if anybody caught, no, I haven't actually. No, I haven't, no. He was awarded a fellowship to the Virginia Center for the Creative Arts and has recently completed his MFA at Cornell University, where he was awarded the Corson Browning Poetry Prize and is currently a lecturer. Now, Alex was chosen by the Tompkins County Poet Laureate, Tish Perlman, and the local poet, the beautiful Kathleen Kramer, as from among 5 poetry contest finalists to be our inaugural Ithaca Festival poet. He's our penultimate performer. Please welcome Alex Chertok.
Thanks, Buffalo Street Books, for having me. Thanks for choosing me as the inaugural poet. So I've got 4 poems here. The first one is called Rebody It Forth. Day of bad news at the doctor's. A day of about face. From health to frail. From self to body. Rote to fraught breath. The sun has a heft of a blue whale's red half-ton heart, risen from the ocean to descend back into it. Day of reversals, of being given this vision of hearts pulsing on the sky. Having come a long way to land here, the waves dump their heavy sacks down, now, filled with their startled debris. They wipe his footprints clean from the beach. Above, the faint start of the moon like a welt. How heals it, wailing at the night. Here of the wind's cool breath against his cheek, but he hears just the horizon a quiver, soon to be jilted. Surely the moon can be other than cyst. What if it were strong, hard-hatted, who left the soft darkness of space behind to clock in? What if the sun shivers down, melted by the moon's desire to wing a whole hand-width across the sky? This kind of trek in one night, small, almost stayed put. The waves, too, pulled up and down and not forward, even in daytime when no one can see the moon pulling. This kind of heart, of grit. What if the moon kept both eyes on its work, even as the sun Icaruses out of view? What if the moon were this tender of water hissing on shore against this body that needs to be lit, needs seeing? This. This is an Ithaca poem. It was warm. This is about a couple of years ago. It was warm out. I was excited about that. I opened the window. And as I was working at my desk, a robin all of a sudden alighted on a bush right outside my window. And I was overcome with this deep desire to communicate with it. Does anyone else have that? Does anyone else walk down the street hoping to talk to animals? Or is this just my pathology? No. Well, good. Well, then you'll understand this. It's called double cross, and there's a word that may be unfamiliar. It was unfamiliar to me. It's tapetum. The word is tapetum, T-A-P-E-T-U-M. It's that layer on the eyes of certain animals that makes it appear to glow in the dark. We all know what it is. That's why I'm the... That's,
Use that later. People are going to be very impressed.
well, that one's on the house. Double cross. The YouTube recording of a robin's mating call fooled her. She flitted her head toward the sound. She landed in the honeysuckle bush at the crest of breeding season to be talked to be talked into it, through the window, into the room where the two-toned song trickled from the laptop. What did she hear? Her own idiom in a crackled accent. A call from both halves of the syrinx, plus a third tone of two tinny speakers. Duplicitous desire. A voice auto-tuned to sound like one she knew. A sentence auto-corrected to mean nearly itself, but not. You're all grown up becomes your sorrow's up. I'm home becomes I'm gone. And this the heart would become if the words were taken at their word. If the robin didn't do her double take and listen with deep question in her face. She turned toward the sound like a person who's locked gaze with a puma's tapetum moving through the brush. But the recording couldn't cut it. It was a key cut round to fit a saw-toothed lock. It was street lamp glint off headphones, and not the puma's eyes she hoped for. She was not the duped one. She flew away with her son holding wings over the telephone wires. She knew better. She knew all along. The bird call buffered, then froze. Its sorrow was up. Its home was gone. This, the single loneliest way to die. This is called The Question. There were as many words for the smell of a train just passed as there were in her mouth. Just a lastness, the rattling sounds of leaving. I was there, first period English, second chair from the door, the day Miss Dax broke down, choked up on the crockery, breaking in her throat. We watched her crack down the middle like a vase, trying to hold it in behind her long desk. Grown woman, wrongful grief, going through a failure in her heart. I was 17. I'd never gotten a speeding ticket. I'd only seen this one country. To me, she was worse than naked. Naked would have stayed quiet. She stammered as if her pants were pulled at her ankles, beaten by both silence and speech. Derelict teacher without her dictionary. Her eyes staring through the back wall of the classroom at either spindrift or snowfall. She couldn't tell what was falling from what had already fallen. Why was all she had, over and over. Why? Climbing over itself before I'd ever held a newborn. I'd never not held my breath passing a graveyard. I'd never changed a flat tire or taken back a gift, never swallowed liquor yet. I hated her that morning. I still bit my nails. I'd never touched a woman's torso. I'd never been in the dark inside of a funeral home. I'd never licked the inside of a pomegranate clean or tasted sweetbreads, hadn't sneaked a look at the cuts on a girl's wrist I knew had been slit. I'd seen wind from the inside of a bus make a wake of a woman's scarf as she ran to catch it. But I'd never yelled for the driver to stop. Please stop. I hadn't yet seen beets turn my piss bloody or my brother turn ghostly on a throatful of kale. I'd never sworn off something I loved, then clambered back to it, begging forgiveness. She must have longed to sleep in that morning, in the warm room of that morning, to hold her long life in her lap and not leave the house. Why? Of herself, of the blurred world her body had left the classroom to bring in, of the books we'd read with no answers yet. Essay prompt to end them all. Why, of us, who never stood up, not once, who let her cry alone? And this is the last one. I realized that this is also a poem about animals and about mating rituals of animals. I don't know what this reveals about me, but I'm scared. Yes. Well, we can talk about titles later. Here's another word that was once unfamiliar to me. The word is lek, L-E-K, lek. It's when males assemble during mating season and engage in these competitive displays, which is what this sounds like a human male thing too, right? It's all true. So I tried to take, it's called watching a clip of an elephant seal. And if anyone has ever watched a clip of an elephant seal on YouTube, you know that it's a rather aggressive scene. It's never a romantic courtship. It's always like the female running in the other direction as the male kind of pursues. I tried as hard as I could to make this kind of aggressive moment a love poem. Tell me if I did it. Watching a clip of an elephant seal. Here it comes, strong again, the lust in me to lek, to tear the flesh from anyone who looks at you wrong. Your body's splayed out and slick in the warm laptop light on the beach of this couch. The urge rises to ride roughshod and unbidden over your ribs, then all at once to be ridden, to tear and also to be torn in two and gored by you. My one hand makes its clumsy, scarred-chested charge, and my other nuzzles your scared young, huddled beneath. Grunt and gruffless coupled. Whale bones and planktonic tongue. I want to bite and be bitten both, to tusk the gluten and the worry from your stomach and better you tenderly. You can nurture the beachmaster down to a hatchling. You've given them all to me. The bull's tooth to fight for you, the pup's fear of losing you, the mother's stroke. With a proboscis bearing down, I breathe your name, Fred, to soften my chest's hard shield and what's hidden, what you found and budded, my huddled beneath. Thank you.
So our final artist is the second poet laureate of Tompkins County, Michelle Courtney Berry. Yes, exactly. Thank you, yes. Michelle is an award-winning poet, author, speaker, stress management coach, and entrepreneur. She's a feminist, playwright, performer, Reiki master teacher, devoted mother, a former college faculty lecturer. Michelle is an American of African, Irish, and Cherokee heritages. Born in Manhattan, and raised 2 hours north in the Catskill Mountains, where she began writing at a young age in her family's log cabin in the woods. Michelle went on to earn a graduate degree in communication from Cornell University and a dual degree in English, literature and rhetoric, and political science from Binghamton University. Her work has appeared in various literary journals, presses, and publications, including the Patterson Literary Review, Random House, Nocturnes, a review of the literary arts, Oxford Magazines, and Horticulture. She's the author of The Month of Not Speaking, Breathe, and Labor. Please join me in welcoming Michelle.
I always wrote, but Ithaca is the place that named me poet. And I was in graduate school at Cornell University at the time, and I was in denial that I was a poet. And there was a brother named Ray Waller from Detroit. And I was really, really blessed because he made me write a poem every day when I was in graduate school at Cornell, and I hid in my room, and he was like, I hear you breathing. So, so I called my book Breathe. So this one is for my grandmother, Annie, who I know is hanging out with Maya right now and making cornbread. Cane. Grandma Annie always brought the cane down with one swift flash, a cutting stroke so perfect that even white folks had to go on and praise her. She worked the fields from the first hint of daylight, her long body stronger than the plow animal in front of her, the blue flowered dress hitched up beyond what was considered appropriate. Shoot, she'd say. It's too hot to be formal. Sometimes she'd turn her dark brown face up to the sweltering sky, talking to God, her mouth full of praises, but scant of wishes, dreams. And when she was done praying, my Grandpa James would slide up alongside her, pat her on the behind a few times here and there, and say real sly and slow in her ear, "Strong like an ox, I reckon." She'd snort and brush past him, her pace quickening, her mind anticipating that favorite time of day, dusk, when a slight breeze came over you and your eyes strained to remember the last row you were on. Then all at once it was night, a time rich with blessings, like having your own thoughts to think on, the collards meat fat back on the stove, the thick crust of cornbread dabbed greasy with butter, the oil lamp burnishing the room, the empty pie plates in the sink, the girls splashing, the sounds of tin and water, the tumbling into bed, their sure breathing and the rocking chair creaking. Grandma Annie adjusts the sewing in her lap, the needle in one hand, the stitching so straight you'd swear and be certain a machine had gone and done it. Sometimes Grandpa would sit up beside her in his drawers, shirtless. She'd look up from her sewing and smile just a little bit. He'd take a sip of whiskey. She'd take in his golden skin, wavy hair under his arms, the promise of what was between his legs. Maybe it was the cane's stiffness, its toughness, even in the breaking that she admired. It sure wasn't the cotton, its intolerable whiteness, the insufferable bowls. But tonight, she wasn't in the mood to remember things that pained her. Tonight she was in the mood for her husband, who put his drink down, leaned over and uncoiled the heavy braids from her head and pulled her up. She spits a little snuff into the sink, takes a sip of honey water, and heads to bed. Naked, she licks his palm, that Bible of the body, her pulse in her throat, the sweat like sugar on her tongue. It was a long time, thank you. It was a long time before, I was so embarrassed. I was like, when I first read it, I thought, I gave Grandma a sex life. She had to have had it. She had 6 babies, you know what I mean? But Grandma sex. And then I thought, one day I will be a grandma and hope to hell somebody realizes I still want to have sex. Look at that. So, but everybody was so old. When you were 18, 40 was like near death. I realized when you find out you have themes that I'm obsessed with frogs. Did not know, but it appeared in like every poem. And I was like, maybe I'd write something about the frogs. So I have a new manuscript called Necessary Offerings in the Land of the Frog King. Small offerings. Frogs, I once thought, spoke to nobody in particular, nor did I believe there was some wise elder frog king offering kind counsel to the dull-shored human and other lessers as it drifted by in its lily pad of thatched weeds, palm fronds, and swamp root. That was, of course, until I heard a gaggle of toads giggling in the rain spout runoff, splashing in the big mud hole beneath the basement window. Some were as tiny and moon-shaped as my fingernail. Others were half the size of my 7-year-old hand, dropped off by their big-toed mothers and the even bigger Frog King, who left the young to chat and leap in what was soon to become a most auspicious amphibian playpen. The elder toads would spring off, leaping across the moss-covered lawn, away to manage the very grown-up business of fly, beetle, and grub hunting in the nearby woods. It was verdant. I cupped the smallest, a gurgle of delight in my hands. Those were the ones I shared my treasures with. The unhatched snail egg, wild silken rosebud, and white-whittled birch twig, which was perfect for escaping the sudden rush of water from pipes or bladders. I lay upon the earth, closing my eyes under the sun, their toad-speak soft in my ears. The king of the frogs seated nearby. He told me far more than play and run. But I swore to keep it all to myself. As I shared the small offerings of dead flies, I remembered how easily everything rolled from my tongue. Thank you. How my father prepared me. When I was 11, my father felt I needed some sort of coming-of-age experience. 2 years shy for the age for a bat mitzvah, and not Jewish, he came up with something so original, no other black girl I knew had ever experienced it. He took me ice fishing. On a day so cold it hurt, his voice drowned out my mother's protest. She's black, Ma, she's poor, she's going to Cornell, she may as well learn suffering. Trees bearded with ice, the smoke sky, and everywhere the sound of falling as the truck rattled the ice rods, spinning reels, and compasses. In the hitch, blankets, buckets, and 24 crappy minnows in the rusted red tin. My father, seated like a Buddha, adjusts the bucket, drills the holes, and pitches forward. God damn! He laughs. It's cold. But how long can you sit on a bucket watching the white-skinned evergreens, the downy snow blindness, and the hoof-eyed doe skittering? I mean, in the end, ice fishing is an act of desperation. Many years before he died, my father fell through the ice, kicked his way back to memory, came home blued, withered, refusing to talk. Now the orange flag bolts up. We tug and grip the line. The stakes heed, fluorescent rods stripe the sky. We win! Meaning, the bass got tired of all the ridiculous flailing, jerking, cursing, and heaving, and just heaved its own self out of the water and just gave in. More annoyed than startled, its dark eye pulsed, its mouth opened and closed. My own mouth opened, closed. Daddy, can't we save it? Why can't we just throw it back in? Don't cry, my father said. Everything dies. And the last one is first love poem. I can never write love poems, but I want to. Want to write poems that make you relent and read Neruda. Want to write poems that shock and make you hot. Want to recite poems that make you hungry for plátanos, arroz con pollo y cuchifritos. Want to sing poems that make you forget the toothless lady who stole your candy. Want to be poems that flock like birds to the edges of your dreams. So when you wake, you burn for me. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. So I want to thank you for making Ithaca the place that it is. Thank you for being here. Thank you to the festival organizers, to Buffalo Books, and most of all to the performers. Thank you all.